The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the Texas Mortgage Bankers Association's 2022-2023 Education Webinar Series, a part of the Education and Endowment Committee led this year by Pam Jenkins and Dave Toggenbaugh. I'm Hannah Barton and I will be introducing our speaker today. This webinar should take about an hour, but feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar using the chat window. And as always, if you have additional questions, you may email Carol at the email address on the slide. Today, I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Blaine Breda. Blaine is a mortgage industry veteran who began his career in 1985 and is currently a senior national trainer and instructional designer at ArchMI. A gifted trainer and coach, he helps individuals and organizations differentiate themselves and achieve their goals in a highly competitive mortgage environment. As an accomplished thought leader, public speaker, and debater, Blaine earned the title of America's Greatest Thinker in 2005 and 2022, and he holds the National Speaker Association's highest earned designation, Certified Speaking Professional. Notably, in 2019, he published an award-winning book chronicling his inspirational 500-mile trek of the Camino de Santiago across Spain, and he is an avid recreational athlete, having conquered an Ironman distance triathlon and multiple ultramarathons, including a 100-mile race. Blaine is a Mensa member with certificates in distance education from Indiana University and applied neuroscience from the Neuroscience School. His public career and personal achievements exemplify his commitment to excellence, innovation, and continuous learning. I know Blaine personally, and I can tell you he is the highest achiever I know. So we're very happy to have him here to talk to us about the habits of high achievers. So Blaine, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you, Hannah. I wouldn't classify myself as being, the highest achiever that you probably know, because in reality, I think anybody who has signed up for this is a high achiever. I mean, the high achievers are the people who invest in themselves, who even when they're busy, which I know you may not be particularly busy at this moment, but even when we're busy, high achievers are always looking to learn more. They know that there's more that they can learn. There's more ways that they can grow. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the context of this presentation and kind of, where did these ideas come from, and why am I the one that's delivering this information to you today? It is an interesting thing to think about. What would be these traits of high achievers be? And it's not like there's a definitive list, right? It's not like there is just one list of traits. And so what I'm going to share with you today are 10. And these are 10 things, and you'll see them come up in a moment, some of which you'll immediately be familiar with, and others maybe not as much. But what I did as I kind of started to develop this presentation, first of all, I took a look at, where are we at right now? Like what's happening? And honestly, we're in unprecedented times, right? I almost am getting really tired of using that word, unprecedented, because it just seems like for the last many years, there are so many things in our lives that we have said, this is unprecedented. But really, this is a challenging time in our industry. We are kind of dealing with a set of circumstances that maybe have never really been exactly what they are now. And of course, the good news is we know that things will change again, right? Nothing stays in place forever. But let's just acknowledge that, this has been a rough period of time in our industry, and even more appropriate that we look into what can we do, and I'm not here to give you tactics like this is what you need to do to go get more business. You can certainly take the ideas I'm going to share with you and do just that. But rather, I did what most of us would do when we're searching for information, right? I went onto the internet. And I found what is probably the shortest blog post that exists on the internet. It is literally 11 words, and it basically answers the question, the one secret thing all successful people do. They don't look for secrets to success in freaking blog posts, right? And that is kind of the irony of this whole discussion that we're going to have today, is that we kind of intuitively know what works for us, what doesn't work for us, things we've tried, maybe some things we haven't tried, but we'd like to. And so what I really want you to do is just put these ideas on for size, like just try them on. Just see if there's anything that you hear today from these 10 ideas I'm going to share with you that you think might be valuable, that might actually move the needle for you a little bit. So I'm going to give you a quick preview here of what the 10 things are. I would encourage you to take some notes along the way. I certainly want you to relax and sit back and resist the temptation to multitask and check your email and look at your phone. I mean, if you can't give yourself 60 minutes to invest in yourself, that's something we probably need to work on, right? So I do want you to just kind of sit back and relax and soak in the information. But at the same time, if you're getting ideas about things from what I'm sharing, I want you to be able to write those things down. So these are the 10 traits we're going to walk through. Now, there is some organization to these. In other words, if you ask yourself, in thinking about high achievers that you might know, maybe these are notable public figures, exceptional athletes or people that have just achieved a lot of success in their field, you will kind of notice as we walk through these that, yeah, by and large, these are traits shared by high achieving, successful people. The good news is, though, I don't think we have to excel at all of these things, right? I mean, some of these things we're going to have more strength in than others. And it's just a matter of finding something in this list that you think would make a difference that you could also improve upon as you go about your day. And some of them, as you're looking at these, it kind of sounds like, yeah, I think I'm pretty sure where Blaine's going to go with that. Hopefully I'll surprise you a little bit. And some of these may not be intuitive to you at all, and you may have kind of no idea where we're going with that. So let's just dive in. And these aren't in any particular order of importance, but I would suggest that this first one is pretty important, and that is to leverage your strengths. Successful people don't obsess over their weaknesses, even though that is human nature, right? It is human nature to be critical of ourselves and to try to fix or improve the things that we don't think we're very good at. Now, I'm not suggesting that we ignore our weaknesses. I'm just suggesting that we shouldn't focus on them. In other words, if you stick to your core competencies, if you stick to the things that you excel at, you're going to get a lot more payback on that time and effort than you would ever get trying to boost your weaknesses up to something better than mediocre, right? There's a thing called the strengths movement that came into corporate America probably a couple of decades ago. And it was this idea that, when we sit down with employees and you probably have had this thing called an annual review, right? Where you kind of sit down with your manager and you look back on the last year and the goals that you'd set and how did you do? And then we're going to forecast into next year. And this is what the company or your manager wants you to do. And as part of that discussion, there's always a discussion around the things that, you're really good at this. These are the things that we want you to do more of that. And then there's also this list of, areas for improvement or development or things that maybe you're not that good at. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but the things we're not very good at continue to be things that we're not very good at, right? I mean, we're just like, if I'm not a good cook, are there things I could do to be a better cook? Like, could I take a course? Could I watch YouTube videos? Could I go to culinary school? I mean, certainly there are things I could do if I'm not a good cook to become better. But if I'm just not good in the kitchen, like this is just not for me, the time I'm going to spend trying to get better at that isn't worth the effort. If instead I identify, well, what am I really, really good at? And I put my time and energy into developing those core competencies even further, that's a much bigger payoff. So accept the fact that there's some stuff we don't do well. And if you could design your own job description, my recommendation would be fill most of your day with the stuff that you rock at and put a minimal amount of time into your day on the stuff that you're not good at. Now, I realize we don't always have the ability to design our job and design exactly how our day goes, but if our mindset is, I'm going to build my strengths and focus on them, and I'm not going to worry too much about the things that I'm not good at. Now, if you're not sure what you're good at, take an inventory, and some people, probably not this group, but some people kind of don't know, right? It's like if someone were to ask you, what are your talents? What are your gifts? What are you really good at? You might be very modest. You might actually say, I'm not particularly that good at anything. I mean, yeah, I'm okay at stuff, but I don't really have any gifts. I'd say that's actually nonsense. And so what you may need to do is ask other people. Capture every compliment. Any nice thing that has been said to you about who you are and how you do what you do, whether it's from coworkers or borrowers or realtor, whomever, professionally or personally, has gone out of their way to tell you what they really admire in you. Keep track of that stuff, because what you'll find as you look at that over time is that there's a few key things that keep being said. That, by the way, is your brand, right? No disrespect to the people out there putting on branding webinars and trainings, but this idea of I'm going to create my brand and then I'm going to go out into the marketplace and tell people what my brand is. I honestly think your brand is what other people say it is, right? Our brand, our strengths are what other people are acknowledging in us, not what we go out into the marketplace and, shout from the mountaintop that this is what we're good at. So that's it. That's the first of these 10, and that's kind of how these are going to go. I'm going to provide some context, a couple of examples, just try to get you thinking about these in some new and different ways. And if any one of these 10 things, resonates with you, then it's been time well spent. Okay, so the agreement here at this point is successful, high-achieving people are folks that know what their strengths are and they leverage those strengths. They minimize weaknesses. They don't obsess over weaknesses. In fact, what some people do is let other people do the stuff that they're not good at, right? Now, you may not be in a position where you can do that, but you can certainly imagine that there are people out there who delegate the things that they're not good at because they know it's a waste of my time to try to get better at those things. Okay, that's number one. Here's number two. Successful, high-achieving people are problem solvers. Now, you could say that just being in this business that we're in, that we're kind of constantly solving problems for people. But let me take it a little step further. I'm going to suggest that we become the kind of people that are actually looking for problems. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about the negative person who's constantly complaining, right? Why do we have to do it this way? Why are things done like this? I'm not suggesting we be that person. I'm suggesting we be the people who are looking for things that could be improved upon. Right? We're not waiting to be told either by frustration when somebody comes to us and says, I'm really frustrated with how you all are doing this. Couldn't it be made better? Right? That we're proactively looking around at our work and how we do it, our industry, and asking ourselves, could this be done differently? Could this be done better? And so in addition to looking for problems, of course, what people in leadership want from us is some ideas on how to fix them, right? So it's one thing to just be the person that notices there's a problem. It's another thing to have a solution, or at least an idea for a solution to that problem. And it's even a more amazing thing if you can kind of identify a problem that people didn't even know they had, right? It's like giving people Tylenol for a headache that won't happen for another hour from now. I mean, can you imagine how amazing you would be to someone when you can get in front of something that hasn't even affected them yet? And by the way, here's the solution to this thing that hasn't even started hurting yet. I mean, it's not like this is a daily thing that we're going to be able to discover in our work, but there are opportunities to do just this. And what I would engage in is what I call possibility thinking. And it's kind of like that childlike way of looking at the world. What do 5-year-olds ask incessantly? I mean, to the point that many times we adults get really frustrated, right? They ask, why? And rarely do they ask it only once. When you answer the why question, that can often be followed up with, and why is that? And then you answer that, and then they say, and why is that? Right? And sometimes we get exasperated and just say, well, just because, right? Because it's the way it is, because I told you so, right? They're employing a technique that they don't even know they're using. That's a really good way to truly get at the heart of a problem or at the heart of anything. As an example, if I were to just ask one of you, tell me one goal that you have either for the rest of this year or into next year that's important to you. And maybe it's an income goal. You might say, well, Blaine, I'd like to earn X number of dollars. If I were to then say, well, why is that? Well, then you might say, well, that's an amount of money where I wouldn't have to worry about paying my bills. I'd feel fairly comfortable with my income. You know, I just would like to be very comfortable and know that I'm not going to have to worry about where is money coming from. Well, why is that? Well, now you've got to think a little harder about, so why is that important to you? And maybe it's something like, well, because I really want to provide security for my family. You know, I grew up in a very insecure financial situation, and I don't want that to be the way that the people that depend on me, you know, that their lives go. And why is that? In other words, if we keep asking why at least 3 or 4 times, what we're going to get to is the real reason why this is important. And it's that real reason that things are important that makes us act and do the things necessary to change that, right? So possibility thinking is kind of like that 5-year-old that's looking at the world and going, well, why is it this way? So let me just give you 3 more questions besides why, and these aren't going to show up on the screen, so you might want to jot these down. 3 more questions besides why that I think of as possibility thinking. These are just questions to kind of get your creativity going, right? So why is a good question. So is why not? Why not? Outstanding question. Number 3, why not now? Why not now? I mean, there's so many brilliant ideas that we come up with, and it's always about, yeah, we'll deal with that later. Why not now? And the 4th one, why not me? Right? How can I be part of the solution? How can I be part of solving this problem? Successful, high-achieving people not only leverage their strengths, which was trait number 1, but they're problem solvers. They're people that look for ways to make life better, easier, you know, put whatever adjective you want in there. They look for things that can be improved upon, and they figure out how to do it. All right, that's number 2. Here's number 3. I'm going to suggest, and again, this is largely my opinion. I mean, I did my homework, I did some research, I looked at my own life and the things that I've done that I'm happy about, but obviously a lot of this is the world according to Blaine. So take it for what it's worth. You know, you can certainly disagree, right? That I have no problem with that. But I'm just going to suggest here with point number 3 that what we really need to focus on is not so much managing our time, which we're pretty obsessed with, right? I mean, we've got apps and we've got trackers and we've got all kinds of technology and we've got all these things that are constantly trying to squeeze every productive minute out of every hour. What about our energy? I mean, isn't it the energy that we bring to what we're doing that determines how well it goes, as opposed to the time we put in? Isn't it the energy that you put into what you're trying to achieve that actually will dictate how that goes, as opposed to the time that you put in? And so while we're obsessively, in fact, I would suggest that while we're obsessively focusing on time, we're actually draining our energy, right? Because it's exhausting. So what I put on here is just kind of some ways that you could break up your life, right? I mean, there's kind of like my physical life, right? My health, right? My vitality. And there's my mental state, my outlook, my attitude, my knowledge. And there's my emotional being. And then there might be a spiritual or religious dimension to your life. And then there might be, you know, family, and there might be community, and there might be your business. In other words, we have these different parts of our lives. And what I'm going to ask you to consider is, are there things that you're doing in any of those parts of your life that are either giving you energy or sucking the energy out of you? Right? As an example, when you're dealing with your gifts and your strengths, right, when you're doing work that is really using the best use of you, that actually is not depleting. That actually is like putting more fuel in the tank. Whereas when we're doing those things that we're not good at and we really would rather not do, that's sucking energy out of us. There are people in our lives that anytime we're with them, they build us up, they energize us, we feel better just having been around them. And there's also people in our lives that sometimes just drain the energy completely out of us, right? This is stuff that we might be able to manage, right? How do we put more of the things in our life that give us energy and less of the things in our life that suck energy away, right? As someone who does a fair amount of exercising, right? Some people would look at exercise and say, well, that takes energy away. That's a very depleting thing. It makes you exhausted. It can do that, but exercise can also energize you, right? And make you feel more vibrant, right? So each of us has to kind of figure out, well, what are these things, right, that help us or hurt us when it comes to energy? Now, in all fairness, let's at least kind of talk about mind-body connection here, right? And Ernest Holmes long ago said something that I thought was brilliant, which is that where the mind goes, energy flows. What we pay attention to is pretty much where our energy goes. And I don't want to trigger anybody and get into politics and all the dysfunctional things about government and all this kind of stuff that gets us anxious. But if you do think about the amount of media that we consume, however you do that, right? Whether it's, through social media or through, cable news networks or however it is that you get your media, much of it is designed to stir you up, right? To either make you angry or fearful, right? Because that's what, it's ironic that that's what people keep coming back for more, right? But that's kind of what media is supposed to do. Well, I shouldn't say supposed to do. It's kind of what it's designed to do, is to stir us up in some way, and usually in a not a very good way. Well, so if our mind is always going to fear and anger and conflict and dysfunction, that's where our energy is going as well. So unplugging from some of that would be a suggestion, right? I mean, I want to be informed. I want to know what's going on in the world. I want to have a broad perspective of the issues and challenges that we face as a country and a world. But at the same time, I have to unplug from that periodically, or what I find is that it's completely sucking the energy out of me. All right. The other thing that kind of ties into this is happy people tend to have more energy. I mean, have you ever noticed that? Right? People that are positive, enthusiastic, it's not just that the glass is half full, it's, well, I can always refill the glass, right? I mean, they're just people that are, up. They've got a lot of energy, don't they? As are people who are here in the moment, present, not spending as much time worrying about the future or obsessing about the past. We really do spend actually very little time in the moment. And I know you've heard this before, right? This is not stuff you've never heard. But people that seem to be the most energized are the people that are very present in the moment. They're not worried about the future. They're not obsessing about the past. They're focused primarily on the here and now. And that seems to give them the energy they need to manage what's happening right now. And also helpful people, right? Kind people, compassionate people, people that go out of their way to show acts of kindness to other people. They actually seem to they get energy from that, right? Now, you may be one of those people. I'm not. And it's not that I don't care about other people. It's that I'm so focused on what Blaine needs to do that while I'm out and about in the course of a day doing Blaine things, I'm not noticing that somebody's bag of groceries fell over in the parking lot and it might be nice if I went over and helped them, or that, somebody's having a problem with a child and they could use a little assistance. Or in other words, these things are all around us that are opportunities where we could show a little compassion or show some kindness, but we have to actually be aware that they're there and then be willing to step in. And what I have found when I notice the people that are really good at that, like the people that are much more mindful about how they could be of service to other people, is that they seem to be happy and have energy and feel really fulfilled, as opposed to me, who's all focused on what Blaine needs to do. And much of the time that feels more draining, right? You see what I'm kind of getting at there? So again, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just trying to give you some suggestions and some ideas. And hopefully a few of these things you can try on for yourself. All right, so that's the third idea, is to manage your energy as opposed to working so hard at managing your time. Here's number 4. Now this one you may have never heard of before, at least in the way that I'm going to describe it. First of all, these words are not words that we often say, right? Assimilate versus accumulate. Here's what I mean. Successful, high-achieving people really get the full value, the full nourishment from something before they move on to the next thing. In other words, they have the ability to stay focused, They have the ability to stay with something to make sure that they've extracted the full value that they can get from it before they're moving on to the next thing, like a squirrel, right? Someone else got my attention, right? And immediately took my attention away. Let me give you some practical ideas. You're getting some information today, right? We're spending an hour together. I'm sharing some information and some ideas. There may be a handful that you find worthwhile. Will you actually use them, integrate them, get the full value from them before you're moving on to, well, what are some other ideas? I'm a big reader. In fact, I'm often reading more than one book at a time, which I don't recommend because it gets kind of confusing. Like you lose the track of one. And I primarily read nonfiction. I have a really hard time with fiction. But regardless, I read a lot. But I'll read a book and it's got all these ideas, right? This person has spent 30 years doing something and they're writing down in a book that I can read in a couple of hours, everything they've learned in 30 years. There's a lot of great information in there, but I can't tell you how many times, as soon as I'm done with that book, I'm immediately reading another one. But no, wait a minute, aren't there a lot of ideas that I haven't even used yet? Right? Aren't there a lot? And by the way, once I'm into that new book, I'm going to forget the stuff that was in the previous book. So even with good intentions, I'll go to a training, a seminar, a conference, and I'll write pages of notes, but then I'm on to the next thing, right? So that's what I mean by getting full nourishment from information and ideas. What about experiences that we have in life? I've had the opportunity to take my family to Europe a couple of times, these amazing trips of several weeks in several countries, and I mean, just incredible life experiences. But I found on reflecting back on those trips that so much was missed by me because I was acting as the tour guide, right? I was the one that was trying to keep us on track and trying to make sure that we got to everything we wanted to do. And oh, by the way, we have to get tickets for this thing now because we don't want to wait in line tomorrow. And there's a train at 4:30 we have to catch. And to catch the train, we have to take a right? I'm so busy with the details that I'm missing, you know, the Colosseum in Rome, right? And so again, looking back, it's like, did I get the full nourishment from those experiences, or was I thinking about the future too much and not getting the nourishment? And if for no other reason, just to be selfish, we all know that it's a far more valuable use of time to extract every bit of value from an existing relationship, right? From an existing person that has already entrusted you to do business with you than it is to go out there and find new people, right? So are we taking it, I don't want to sound, you know, negatively from a sales perspective, but are we taking full advantage of the relationships we already have in terms of generating business and activity, as opposed to, well, I just got to go find some new people, right? I have to go find some new people, especially in a time like now when there's not a lot of new people, right? Okay, so that's what that point really refers to, is extracting the full value and meaning and nourishment from things before we move on. And high achieving successful people tend to have that ability to focus before they move on to the next shiny object. Okay, number 5, communicate. Now, I will admit, I probably think more about this than your average bear, right? I mean, I do this for a living, right? I'm a professional communicator, so I take this really seriously. You may not take it as serious as I do, and that's fine. But let me just share a couple of things that concern me about communication in general that I've noticed over the last several years. First of all, we've got all these ways to do it, right? I mean, it's not just talking to people, it's email and texting and social media. And right, I mean, there's just all these ways that we interact with people that are communication, right? Much of the time, it's not effective. What I mean by effective is message understood, right? Message received, message understood, message acted upon, no confusion, no misunderstandings. I mean, even as a professional communicator on almost a daily basis, and it might even be more than once a day, I could very likely have a misunderstanding with my wife. Oh, so that's her fault, right? Because I'm the professional communicator? Well, no, if there's a pattern of, boy, I'm having a lot of misunderstandings with people lately, I have to take some responsibility for that, right? So all the choices we have about how to communicate kind of makes it harder. Then the other thing I've noticed over time is that we take it casually. Now, what I don't mean by that is casual in tone. I actually love the fact that, like, I'm having a conversation with you. Now, I realize it's, one way, right? We're not really talking together today. But as you can tell, I'm not presenting to you. I'm not reading a script. Anytime I give this presentation, I'm going to do it different than the time I did it last time, right? Because I'm literally imagining that I'm sitting with you and that we're just talking about these ideas, right? I like the fact that we do that we're more casual in the way we communicate and not so formal. But what I mean by taking it casually is that we don't give it any thought. While I'm talking to you today, my heart is beating, my lungs are moving air in and out of my body, but I'm not thinking about those things. I mean, those things are just happening, right? And sometimes I think that's how we take communication. We don't think about it. Like, what are you talking about? I just do it. I make phone calls, I talk to people, I send text messages, I post on social media periodically. I mean, I just do it. You don't give it a lot of thought. I think we're missing an opportunity to be more effective. So here's the biggest challenge, right? Is that we think communication is taking place and yet it really isn't, right? It's kind of this myth that we think we're clear. We think we've said it well, right? Not that long ago, I was at the gym in the morning and then I was driving back home to my home office to start my day. And we had moved to a new area. And so I wasn't really that familiar with the streets and how, all that stuff. And I came to this intersection where I wanted to make a right-hand turn. And there was this sign, right? And I think your laws in Texas are comparable in that right-hand turns, and I know you've got some different ways of turning there in Texas that are actually unique to Texas. I don't know if you know that or not. But generally speaking, a right-hand turn on a red light is allowed unless there's a sign prohibiting it, right? So, I mean, if there's a sign that says no turn on red, then you can't turn, even if there's no cars coming, right, from the other way. But otherwise, you can generally turn right on a red light. So I came to this intersection. I'm the first guy at the light. I want to make a right-hand turn, but I see this sign. Now, it's only 6 words. If anything should be crystal clear, it would be what's on a traffic sign. I'm paralyzed here. I don't know what to do. I don't understand what this sign means. Now, it's rush hour. It's in the morning, right? And these long lines of cars are stacking up behind me. And in all kinds of various ways, they're trying to tell me what they think the sign means. But I wait until I get a green light and then I feel safe to turn. But when I get home, I'm a curious guy. I call the police. And I want to know, what does this sign mean? They weren't sure. Now, I'm no criticism of law enforcement. I'm just saying this is confusing. It's only 6 words on a fairly small piece of real estate, and yet it's confusing to people. By the way, they've since taken it down because ultimately what the police and I agreed the sign must mean is no different than what the law already is, which begs the question, why the sign, right? So I'm just suggesting that this kind of stuff happens all the time, but we're largely unaware of it. We don't know that we've confused somebody. We don't know that we've maybe angered or upset somebody because it was unintentional. So let me just cut to the chase, right? Because these mistakes can be costly, right? Miscommunication can cost us in relationships. It can cost us in business. And so when I think about, is there just one thing I could share with you? Here's a woman looking at a statue. It's a pretty well-known statue. You may have heard of it before. It's known as the thinker. And so I've kind of got this model of communication because my brain thinks in models, right? And so any kind of communication that we engage in begins with a thought. It starts with something in our head, right? So you ready for my brilliant idea? Think before you do it. Now, I'm not saying all the time. I'm not saying we always have to sit down and ponder the origins of the universe when somebody just asked us if we want, to upsize our value meal at the drive-through window, right? I mean, there's a lot of times when we don't have to give stuff a lot of thought. But see, what happens is we develop habits and routines. And when we have habits and routines, we're often unaware of what we're even doing. And so if the habit and routine is that I just don't even really think about it and I just do it, then I'm really never thinking about it. And so what I'm suggesting is when it's important, when it matters, when I have to say something significant, when I have to have a difficult conversation with someone, I probably should give it some thought before I click send. And there are some things that I wish I could have retrieved after sending them, right? Things that have actually impacted some of the relationships in my life because they were taken in a way that was not nearly what I meant, and I haven't actually been able to, fix that. Okay, so high achieving successful people, not all of them, generally speaking, focus on communication. They know how important it is, but you can also find some examples of some really successful people that are horrible communicators. So imagine what they could do if they got better at it. Okay, here's number 6. Delaying gratification, not having to have things happen right away. Now, you might be thinking, well, we're certainly dealing with that in our industry right now. Yeah, I'm working really hard and doing a lot of stuff, but not generating a whole lot of business right now. So you're probably getting a little better at this than you thought you would be. But it is a trait of people who are successful that they don't have to immediately have everything, come to fruition. What you're looking at here is a child, a 4-year-old who's staring at a marshmallow. And I want to share with you kind of 2 different studies that have to do with this idea of willpower versus delaying your gratification. And some of the research on this is kind of going back and forth, as research often does, right? That it hasn't been definitively figured out yet. But some research is showing that willpower, like exerting willpower, is almost like a battery that has a limited lifespan, right? And if you've ever tried on New Year's Day to suddenly do the 10 things on your New Year's resolution list, you know that over a period of time, and it's a pretty short period of time, those things start to fall away, right? Because there's just only so much effort that we can exert to try to do something that's not natural. So what I'm going to suggest is that we want to try to make delaying gratification natural, because I don't think it is. I think we want things to be right away. I mean, everybody wants the Amazon experience, right? Especially after COVID. I just want to be able to point and click a few times on my device and magically things happen, right? So let me share with you a couple of studies about this. One of them is called the marshmallow test. That test was first done decades ago, and they've redone it several times to validate that it still holds true. And then there's another test I want to share with you that has to do with college students and chimpanzees, all right? So what's the basic gist here? In the marshmallow test, it was 4-year-old children. And basically, they were put into a room and a marshmallow was placed in front of them. And they were told that the person was going to leave, right? The adult was going to leave the room, and they were going to come back in a few minutes. And if the marshmallow was still there, they would get another one, and then they could eat them. But if they had eaten some or all of that marshmallow by the time they come back, that's all they get, right? So can you delay gratification? Can you wait a few minutes and have twice the marshmallows? With the humans versus chimps, the first part of the test was simply to say, if you're given a treat, would you prefer 1 or 6? Now, these are Harvard students and chimpanzees. And so treats to a Harvard student would have probably been junk food. For the chimps, it would have been fruit. And it's pretty easy if you think about it. It's pretty easy even with an animal. I mean, even think about your pets at home who might not have, the brain capacity of a chimpanzee. If they know that you're going to give them a treat and you offer them 1 or 6, they're probably going to prefer the 6, right? And that's pretty much universally what happened with the students and the chimps. They said, yes, if it's a treat, I want 6. Okay, so what happens? Well, with the children, it was a 15-minute wait. They had to wait 15 minutes before that adult came back in the room. With the students and the chimps, it was only a 2-minute wait. In other words, they were given one treat, and if they didn't eat it for 2 minutes, they got 5 more, right? So they got their 6. But if they did eat the one treat, then that's all they got. And then you can imagine, even an animal, like this is not that complicated of a concept, right? You eat it right away, that's all you get. But if you can get them to hold off, right, for a couple of minutes and then more show up, they're going to be able to put that together pretty easily, right? Okay, if I wait, I get more. All right, so what happened? Well, with the kids, it's about a 30% success rate. Every time they do this test, it's about 30% of the 4-year-olds that can delay gratification, right? With the students and the chimps, there was a 19% success rate. 19% could delay gratification. But the interesting thing is, it was with the wrong group, because the chimps had a 72% success rate, right? Only 19% of the Harvard students waited, and 72% of the chimps did. Now, this baffled the researchers, like, how could this possibly happen? And what they discovered is it's because of our intelligence, it's because of the way that humans think, right? First of all, we don't have a lot of impulse control, right? So, hey, just do it now, right? And we justify, we rationalize, we do things that animals really probably aren't capable of, right? An animal, this is a pretty simple formula. Wait, more show up. Don't wait, that's all you get, right? They're not thinking of anything else. Whereas, what do you imagine people would do? Well, I'm really, really hungry. I think I'm just going to eat this one and not worry about getting more. Or, you know what? I probably shouldn't have more junk food anyway, so I'm just going to eat this one and that's all I get. Or, you know what? I could be dead in 10 minutes, and so I might as well just eat the one that's, I mean, right? We think things that animals probably don't think. That's actually the problem, is our thinking. What they also found with the children, if you go back over to the left-hand side, is that when they followed these kids 15 years later, that 30% group tended to be people that got better grades, you know, they were more successful in whatever sports they were in, they got into better colleges or went to college, etc. So the implication here is willpower doesn't serve us very well because it's got a limited lifespan. But developing the discipline of delaying gratification, not having to have everything happen right away, is something that's a marker of success. And so I'm suggesting that high achieving, successful people can do that. All right, number 7. This one shouldn't surprise you, right? Successful people, high achieving people tend to be action oriented, right? Almost to an extreme sometimes, right? But hopefully I've given you some of these other traits that are helping you to realize it's not all about the activity, right? It's also about managing your energy, and it's also about delaying gratification. And you can start to see how these traits start like working together a little bit. But definitely people that achieve things are action oriented. And you know, you probably heard quotes like this, right? That ultimately, you know, what we regret is not failure, but, you know, the failure to actually do something, right? It's not what we do that haunts us, it's what we don't do, right? I mean, you've kind of heard that expression before. So let's talk about reasons why we don't take action. Procrastination, what I've learned about it is that it's the idea of doing something that's always worse than actually doing it. Isn't this good news? When we're procrastinating, it's this idea of doing something that we don't want to do, right? The idea of it. I'm not talking about moving something on your to-do list from Wednesday to Friday, right? If you've got a to-do list and you've got this thing that you were going to do on Wednesday and you decide, you know, Friday would really be a better day to work on that, that's not procrastination. That's time management, right? Procrastination is when you keep putting off doing something because you just don't want to do it. Right? You associate pain with doing it. The idea of doing it creates an emotional response in you. I don't want to do it. That's procrastination. But what we've learned about procrastination, the people that study it, is that the doing of the thing is never as bad as the idea was. Wouldn't this be really important information to share with young people? You know, who don't want to practice and don't want to do their homework and don't want to, you know, don't want to do the drills that their coach tells them to do so they can be better at their sport. And you've probably discovered this for yourself. And if you watch kids, you'll see that they'll discover it too. The cleaning of their room is never as bad as the thought of cleaning their room, right? So let's just realize that that's what it is. And as soon as we start taking action, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, right? Just break it down. What's the little thing I can do right now? Well, I can pick this thing up off the floor and put it in the hamper. Oh, that wasn't so bad. Well, maybe I can actually make my bed. Well, that wasn't so bad. Maybe I can actually clean up my bookshelf. But if we don't actually take the step because we're frozen in that, I don't want to do it, right? That's where the problem is. The other thing that stops us from taking action is being a perfectionist. And I can sympathize with this. In fact, I can sympathize with everything I'm talking about. That's why I talk about it, right? It's helpful to me to hear me say these ideas to myself. When we have to have everything be perfect before we'll do it, we don't do a lot of things. I mean, I've done a lot of things, and I've not done a lot of things. And often the things that I haven't done is because I wasn't comfortable yet. I'm not ready yet. It's not the right time. Now, maybe sometimes that's actually true, but sometimes that's also just what I'm telling myself, right? Here's what I've learned about taking action. Taking action gives you the information that you were waiting for when you wouldn't take action, right? In other words, if I'm not going to take a step because I don't know what it's going to be like, taking the step will give me the feedback I need that was preventing me from taking action, right? So it's not waiting doesn't give me the feedback. Waiting doesn't inform me. Taking action gives me the information I need. But that's another one of those barriers we have to push through. And then the last thing I'll say about this, when I really looked at kind of the mindset of successful people, they do have that ability to be very hyper focused, even if it's for a short period of time. And what they focus on, what they put their attention on, is just making the effort, just following the steps. Literally, metaphorically, right? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, right? Just take the steps and the results will follow. They don't obsess about what's going to happen. Last year, when I checked off the bucket list item of, running a 100-mile ultramarathon, I can assure you I was not thinking about the 100 miles until I got close to getting there. Because if at the starting line of that event, I was thinking about the enormity of running 100 miles when I had never even run farther than 50 in my entire life, and that had been like 15 years ago, I would have just stopped in my tracks. But it was literally a step at a time, a mile at a time. That will lead eventually to the result, and successful people know this. Okay, number 8. This one might be the hardest for you. This is an image of a monkey, probably in Asia, where sometimes monkeys are trapped. And one of the ways that they trap monkeys is they hollow out a gourd and they put food in the gourd that the monkey would want. And what the monkey has the ability to do is to put its hand into the gourd, but once it grabs onto the food and makes a fist, it can't take the fist out. The hole is not big enough for a fist. And it often won't let go of the food. That's all it would have to do. Metaphorically, I think sometimes, we're imprisoned by our unwillingness to not open up our fist, not to let go. What I've discovered from myself, and maybe it's just a stage of life thing, right? Maybe when you're really young and just getting started out in a career, it would be a different formula. But what I've determined for myself is that when I want to take something to the next level, when I want to achieve something new and different that I haven't done before, right? When I want to really step it up in some way, I can't possibly add everything that's going to be required to do that on top of what I'm already doing in life. I have to actually subtract. I have to actually find things to move out of the way. So it's not so much what do you need to add to your plate to become more successful, it's what's already there that we need to remove, right? It's stopping us in some way. And so I'm thinking that the formula of success is not always about subtraction. It's actually often about, or it's not always about addition. It's often about subtraction. And that what we have to get good at is separating the trivial many from the essential few, right? In anything that you're going to endeavor to do, there's the trivial many things you could be doing, and there's the essential few things we could be doing. And so we have to discern what those are and figure out what are the essential few. You know, ultimately, what is the most essential thing? I get a phone call from my daughter a few years ago, and this is at a time when, you know, I wasn't sure she even knew that that's what a phone did, like make phone calls. I mean, many of you can relate to this when you have children. I mean, calling you? No, they normally will text you if they need you, right? So I'm getting a phone call from her. I decide I ought to pick this up, especially since it's for me. She's not calling her mom, right? And sure enough, she's been in this horrific car accident. She's sobbing uncontrollably. I can hardly understand a word she's saying. Now, having been in many accidents myself, I know what will now follow, right? The enormous pain in the rear end that this is going to be, right? The processes and the paperwork and the body shops and the insurance companies and the dealing with the other person's insurance. I mean, there's like dozens, if not hundreds, of details that follow having an accident. But rather than asking her about any of those things, I'm sure all of you will agree with me that my first question to her was, are you okay? Because that's what's essential, right? I'm separating the trivial many from the vital few. Are you okay? Are the other people involved okay? Right? This is what's the most important thing. In fact, when I call my insurance company to say I've been in an accident, I don't want them to start the conversation with, oh, have you filed the accident online yet? I want them to say, are you okay? Right? Because that's the most important thing when someone's been in an accident, is that the people are okay, right? That there hasn't been an injury or a death, right? So that's just a small example of the kinds of things we have to make that discernment on a regular basis. All right, moving on. Number 9. I'm not going to say a lot about this because we've heard it before, but I am going to show you a quote. I'll let you read it for yourself. It's been attributed to different people, so that's why I haven't given it attribution. That's an interesting thing about the internet. You look something up and it says, oh, so-and-so said this. And then you find out, well, but 20 years before that, so-and-so said it. And so it's like, okay, who actually said this first? Not sure. I heard it from the late Leo Buscaglia. The message is pretty clear. We probably all could increase our appetite for risk. Now, I don't know all of you, and maybe there's a few of you that you already take plenty of risk. And I'm not suggesting to go nuts here, right? I'm not suggesting that we throw caution to the wind and jump off a bridge without the bungee cord, right? I mean, I'm just saying, well, okay, bungee jumping would be maybe an interesting thing to try, but not without the bungee cord, right? So I'm not suggesting we take inappropriate risks. I'm just saying, I know for myself, one of the reasons that one of the things that has held me back is that I haven't taken the risk, right? Whether it be relationship, health, work, right? I mean, there's just lots of places where I haven't taken the appropriate risks. So we have to just figure that out for ourselves. Where can we take a little bit more risk? Because kind of like procrastination, it's usually not as bad as we envisioned it would be. Often it's nothing like we thought it would be. It's actually a lot better than we thought it would be. But we all have to be the judge to that. So that's all I'm going to say about that. The last one, and I did save this one for last because I really do think, because of this challenging time that we're in, this may be more meaningful now than it's ever been. And that is resolve. The best definition of resolve that I've ever heard was to promise yourself you'll never give up. you know, that sounds great. And we've heard it before. But honestly, right, do we live that? I've given up on some things, and sometimes that's the right choice, right? Sometimes it kind of goes to that subtraction idea. Sometimes we have to know when to stop, right? You could call it giving up, but sometimes there's things we need to stop. We need to stop moving in that direction, right? But there are other times when we're really kind of being tested, and what we need is resolve. And it helps when you've got other people around you. This is actually, this picture was probably taken during an event called a Tough Mudder. I don't know if you've heard of a Tough Mudder. Maybe some of you have actually done a Tough Mudder. It's a Tough Mudder is an endurance race, meaning it's 10 to 12 miles long. And there's a couple dozen obstacles that you have to get through in this 10 or 12 mile, length of course. But most of them require working with other people. Like, you're not going to be able to get over, a 12-foot wall by yourself, and unless you're like a kangaroo. So you've got to work with people that you might not even know, right? If you didn't come with anybody, you're working with total strangers to help get up and over and then help other people. And it was one of the reasons I did a Tough Mudder years ago, because it intrigued me. I'm pretty much a runner. That's been kind of my base form of exercise my whole adult life. And so running is a very individual sport. It's kind of just you against yourself. I'm not racing against anybody. I'm not skilled enough to ever, win something. So it's not about speed for me. It's just about accomplishing what I want to accomplish. But I'm not competing against anybody. It's just me. And the Tough Mudder, part of what intrigued me about the Tough Mudder is this working with other people to get through something you couldn't do by yourself. And that's a good reminder when we're in these tough times that, there are people who want to help us, right? If we'll ask. I'm not very good at that. I'm a really independent person. It's hard for me to ask people for help. But part of not giving up is asking for help. I mean, some people think asking for help is a weakness. I would say the opposite. I would say asking for help is actually a strength, because what it's demonstrating is that I'm not going to give up. Please, I need some help. I'm not willing to call it quits, right? I'm not willing to quit, but I need some help. It's actually, I think, a very strong character strength. Anyway, I wanted to kind of end with that one, because I just think that in these times it's really important. And, ultimately, our lives matter. What we do matters. What we accomplish matters. If nothing else, the example that we set for others matters. And I know that sometimes that little voice in your head says, there's nothing that special about me. I mean, I don't really matter that much. What difference does it make? So I just wanted to finish with this African proverb. If you think you're too small to make a difference, you haven't apparently spent a night with a mosquito. Just a little humor to round us out. Okay. We're almost at the top of the hour. I want to turn it back over to Hannah so she can close us out. These were your 10 traits. My hope is that you found some things that were interesting enough that you'll ponder it, you'll think about it, you'll take some action, you'll try them on for size, see how they fit. I wanted to make sure you had my contact information. If you had any questions or follow-up for me, you can certainly reach me at Arch. And from a social media standpoint, LinkedIn would be the best way to connect with me if you want to connect via social media. But at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Hannah. Thank you so much, guys, for your time and attention. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to be with a group that's dedicated an hour of their time to not do other things. So thanks again. Hannah, they're all yours.
Thank you, Blaine. That was wonderful. I'm sure everybody feels inspired and picked up a lot of good tips to get us going next year. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I would like to say thank you to all the attendees for y'all's time. And of course, Blaine, big thanks for sharing your knowledge. And the TMBA continues to work on bringing you great webinars like this one. Please check out the homepage at texasmba.org for the upcoming schedule and watch for those emails from TMBA reminding you to register. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.